So good evening, everyone who's joining us online and everybody who's here in person. These programs are always tricky because I have a camera here and human beings over here. So I think what we're going to try and do is focus on those who are in attendance, since you made the effort to be here. And that's not to be offensive to anybody who joined us on Zoom. I'm also appreciative for your effort, but we give extra points because it's snowing outside. So at the same token, we'll take questions at the end, right? Also from people who are on Zoom, as much as we'll take from people who are here. Daniel's going to be our moderator. So just so everyone knows, Daniel Nurgitz is managing the Zoom feed, and I appreciate his presence here. And there was a handout that's distributed to everyone who's here in person. And if you're joining us on the Zoom, Daniel is going to post in the chat a link so you can click on it and follow along as, and can we do a share screen with that too, Daniel?
It won't show you guys. That's
okay. That's right. It's us or the handout. Okay, let's see how it goes. If everyone can download it, and you can even print it out at your home, that might be the easiest thing, so that you can follow along with us. The genesis of this event, I'll take the blame for it. Trying to follow the developments of this most recent Israeli election. This is the fifth, right? In the past 3 years. Has been rather confusing for me, and I lived in Israel and understand some of the players. So I'm thinking, if it's confusing for me to understand what's going on, it must be at least as confusing for others in our community who are trying to make sense of not just who the people are, but the unusual degree of emotion, I think, that's been associated with this most recent election. And that's quite a thing to say, given how emotional these elections tend to be in Israeli society. Israeli voter turnout is crazy, right? Like, isn't
71% in the last.
I heard it was higher than 71%, but that is even 71 is very high when there's no consequence for not voting. I think most recent Toronto municipal elections, we didn't get to 20%. So it shows the degree of intensity and emotion with which Israelis approach their political system. I think the degree of seriousness to which they approach the elections. And we have an outcome of the election that is quite concerning to a few people because of the way the media has spun the story, right? To summarize, Bibi received the most seats, and our guest is going to go into more detail about this, but Bibi can only become prime minister by going into coalition with some people that the media have said quite condescending things about. And those figures happen to be from the religious Zionist right. So I thought to myself, we need somebody to come to Beth Tikvah who identifies as a religious Zionist, since this is what all the stir is about, to help us understand why the emotion, why are the results in this election so different when it comes to the popularity of religious Zionist leaders? What does it actually mean today in Israel to be a religious Zionist? I thought I knew what it meant, but I'm going to be poking you tonight, Idan, or I should say Rabbi Rakovsky. I'm going to be poking you to try and understand whether that identity is changing now. So I invited a friend who's been with us before. Rabbi Idan Rakovsky is currently an avrech, a visiting scholar with the Torah Mitzion Zichron Dov Kollel of Yeshiva University. So he grew up actually in Montreal, but then made Aliyah to Israel and doesn't identify as a Montrealer. He even was afraid to come here tonight because he doesn't have snow tires. That he's not a Montrealer.
Oh, not
he is
one.
clearly Israeli
Definitely
with a
not.
comment like that. And served actually in very elite we talked about this last time he was here, very elite circles in the Israeli army, but is now learning Torah here, a more quiet life, and enjoys being in Toronto, and actually enjoys reaching out to the broader community, not just speaking to his circles, but reaching out to people beyond his circles to educate. So it's an honor to have Rabbi Idan Rakovsky with us tonight. And just before I want to introduce him, it seems that there was a terrorist attack today in Ariel. So in a program like this, which is dedicated to understanding and deepening our understanding to the land of Israel, we should acknowledge that Israel remains in a very difficult state with attacks that can come from any direction at any time. I believe there was a family that was killed today in Ariel by a terrorist, and maybe that has something to do with our discussion tonight, given that the fear of increasing waves of attacks and the fear of government inaction in response to those attacks perhaps had something to do with the election of a right-wing government. So before I start with questions for Rabbi Rakovsky, present to us, he put together a fantastic booklet here so that we can understand terms, right? Anyone who's been to academic conferences knows that you begin by defining your terms, understanding your terms of reference. So this is the time when those online should be downloading the material. And perhaps you can give us a summary, Rabbi Rakovsky, of what happened in the Israeli elections 2 weeks ago. Who were the power players? Who are the names we should know and the parties we should know?
All that in 1 hour.
Well,
good luck for us.
Give me a summary.
Good luck for us. Thank you, Rabbi Grover. Thank you, everyone. For those of you here in person, and thank for all of you here on Zoom. I saw some names that I'm familiar with. So thank you, everyone, for coming here tonight. It is very it's an ambitious attempt to summarize.
Your best.
I'll try to do my best. As Rabbi Grover said, I'll start from the point that I identify myself as a religious Zionist. The idea of religious Zionism is a very complicated idea. It's a complexity kind of identity that tries to blend religion, spiritualism, Judaism, Torah, halacha, along with the other aspect of Zionism, of commitment to the state of Israel, of believing that the fact that Jews, after thousands of years, are able to get back to their country, to their land, and build an independent democratic country, democratic state, is actually a spiritual thing. It's not just a random event that happened in history. So it's very complicated, very complex, but this is not our focus on today. Regarding the elections in Israel.
But I'm sorry, I'm
yes.
going to pause already. There is a party in Israel called Hatzionut Hadatit, which is, I think, you say it's complex, but we have the freedom to play with that complexity in the diaspora. Whereas it seems that in Israel, to identify as a religious Zionist has political connotations in a way that it doesn't here. There's an actual party that represents you. You don't have to answer. I'm just commenting that that's part of what's complicated here.
There is. Think about, for example,
who leads the Tzionut Hadatit?
So we'll see. His name is Bezalel Smotrich.
Okay.
That's his name. But well, let's go with
Okay.
numbers. First of all, I'm a person of numbers. So let's start with some numbers to understand a little bit what happened here just a little more than 2 weeks ago. Actually, 2 weeks ago from today, because just today, like several hours from for now, they sworn in the new Knesset, the new parliament. Those who were elected 2 weeks ago were today sworn to the Knesset. So it's a great timing to talk about it. So take a look here on page number 2. I brought some numbers just to understand what exactly is the results of those elections. Why is it so clear that Benjamin Netanyahu won those elections? Take a look, first of all, on the numbers. The Likud party, which is the biggest party, the largest party, political party in Israel, for years now already. For years, they're the largest party in huge gap from anyone else underneath them, is led by Benyamin Netanyahu. Now, just not trying to make anyone feel old, Benyamin Netanyahu was the prime minister when I was born.
Wow.
Yeah. And Benjamin, not including my age, but Benjamin Netanyahu is also going to be the prime minister now. And just to understand about the role of such a leader, of such a political character, it's just enough to see the numbers that even after all those years, he still gets this amazing support. So you can see the Likud with 32. You can see the religious Zionist with 14. I'm skipping those who are in the opposite, will be in the opposition.
So what you wrote is the religious Zionist is 3 different parties. So what does that mean? There are 3 different parties.
That's a great
religious Zionist, Otzma Yehudit, and Noam.
And Noam.
So explain.
I'll explain.
So they formed a coalition before the election?
So I'll explain. It's not a coalition. The Israeli, I would say, elections format is a little bit complicated and strange. So in very, very shortly, different parties are able to join together into one party. We call it the bloc, and they're able to run as one united joint party to parliament. And the day after the election, they can all go to themselves and act in the parliament, in the Knesset, as an independent party. But running for the Knesset, to the Knesset, they can do under one block, which means that they can run under one petek, we call it in Hebrew, one note. So if someone wants to come and vote to this party, he can vote only to one party, and he will get all those 3. That's something that happens in Israel, and it happens all the time in Israeli politics. So what happened here?
Hold on. I believe the reason that it happens is because the danger in Israeli elections is falling below 2.5%. Is that the number? Is that where you get less than 2.5%?
It's 3.25.
Oh,
yeah.
sorry, 3.25%.
There's a
Any
threshold.
party that gets less than the threshold of 3.25% of the votes, all their votes are thrown away. So to join together as a bloc ensures that you'll make the threshold plus. So the religious Zionist bloc includes, so you're telling me in the recent elections that you are not allowed to vote. But in the recent elections, there was no Otzma Yehudit option.
No.
On the
Otzma
you don't
Yehudit
vote
option.
for a person.
No.
You vote for a party. You voted for the religious Zionist bloc, which included 3 different parties. The religious Zionists led by Bezalel Smotrich.
You can see, by the way, all the biographs over here.
The biographies are there.
Some biographies over here. You can take a look if you want. So Bezalel Smotrich is the head of the religious Zionist party, which joined with Otzma Yehudit, which is led, that's a very far right.
Right.
Party.
So all the controversy is with Smotrich and
Ben Gvir
is Otzma Yehudit.
and Noam. Noam has one
who is
person.
Noam? I never heard of Noam.
Noam is another religious Zionist party that is, it's only one person that runs the party. His name is Avi Maoz, and he represents the far, I would say, right in terms of not only national right, but religious right. In other words, he represents the more almost Haredi part of the religious Zionism in Israel. The closest you can get, which is still not Haredi. Let's put it like that.
So nobody's heard of that guy before. I don't think
Avi Maoz?
Yeah.
That's his second
But the controversy isn't about him.
also about him.
I don't
I'll
hear-
tell he has
Okay.
a lot of Google Avi Maod, you'll find everything that he said. I'm warning you in advance.
Okay. Ben Gvir is from the Otzma Yehudi Jewish Power Party, but the accusation is he is a Kahanist. Explain what that means when people say he's a Kahanist. You know, Mayor Kahana has associations with this synagogue. He spoke here before. So
maybe you can
explain.
explain what
I
Kahana
want
is.
you to do it. When someone
I'll
calls you
say.
a Kahanist, they're saying what?
They're saying you follow Mayor Kahana's way.
Which
as
is?
simple as it.
Which means
Which
what?
means far right extremism in terms of that. How do you treat the Arabs that live in the country? What is the right relations between church and state in Israel? What does it mean that Israel is a Jewish democracy? For example, how strong should a Jewish culture, or Jewish religion, and halacha and Torah take present in modern Israel?
Right.
What do you do with the settlements? What do you do with terrorists? Many ideas that were, I think, by America, the United States of America, even considered his movement, Kahana's movement, Kach, that was their names, as a terrorist movement.
Right. And Kahana himself was elected to the Knesset and was
He was like, I don't say like disqualified exactly
from the Knesset
from the
because of
Knesset.
extremist views.
Exactly.
Now, if I'm voting for the religious Zionist bloc, you still have connections to your friends back home. I'm sure many of them voted for the religious Zionist bloc. 14, right, seems to be way over what that bloc has done in the past. So one of the things I want you to answer for everybody from your own on the ground knowledge, why did they perform better this election than they had in the past? Do you have friends that voted for them this year who never voted for them in the past?
Definitely.
Okay, definitely. So help us understand why.
I would first of all say that's a wonderful question. I would just say that the idea that this bloc received 14 seats total in parliament is what gave Benyamin Netanyahu the 64, that is even more than he wanted. In order to form a coalition in Israel, you need the majority of the Knesset. 61. The Knesset is assembled out of 120 members of Knesset. You need to have 61 seats in order to form a coalition and then to form from this coalition a government. Netanyahu wanted for years to achieve this 61 and he couldn't for years. That's why we went over and over again for elections. And this time, not only did he pass the 61, he received 64 seats, which is very, very, very strong.
Yes.
Very unusual. And the reason for that...
You're saying strong. Does it also mean stable?
Stable.
That is...
Stable.
Are we going to have another election soon? Or
No.
in your opinion, this gives Bibi...
You'll invite me again in 4 years.
Well, because remember, 2 elections ago, this was all in the hands of the Israel Beitenu party, right? Help me remember who the leader...
Lieberman.
Right. So without Lieberman, Bibi wouldn't have his majority. This is 2 elections ago. Lieberman and Bibi did not get along.
Which is a total different story.
The coalition was very unstable. These are different results. And I'm not sure everyone understands that. I think part of what is important to understand about this is the last of the elections.
People say that the government of his dreams. That's the best he could ever achieve.
Wow.
Some people would say maybe not so much. But I want to answer your very interesting question. Yes. So take a look in page 5. I brought in 3 bullets. I think it can let us understand a little bit. Why did people vote to the religious Zionist bloc? What happened here? 3 answers I can give you for that. 3 answers. The first answer has to do I'll take you all the way back to May 2021. If you remember, Rabbi, and those who are here, Israel suffered a lot from many, I would say...
these were the uprisings of Arab Israeli citizens, not Palestinians.
With Israeli ID.
You remember this 2 springs ago.
Exactly. In May 2021, If you remember, there were uprisings and violence in Lod, for example, who is this is a city that both Arabs, Israeli Arabs, and Jews live together side by side. You can think about Akko, north of Haifa, where there's those kind of cities where both Israelis and Israeli Arabs, Jews and Israeli Arabs live together, usually most of the time peacefully. Something has happened, something has changed, and those Arabs in those cities started attacking their neighbors. Something that we have never seen before in Israeli history. Usually Israeli Arabs, even if they're not the biggest supporters of the Israeli government, they are still Israelis.
Right.
They hold Israeli passports, they hold Israeli IDs, and they're loyal in a certain way to the country. And for many, many years, they lived very peacefully with their neighbors. But something happened in 2021, and it has to do with the Temple Mountain, with Har HaBayit, as we say in Hebrew. And the idea that there were a lot, the Arab thought that maybe Israel is willing to change the status quo on the Temple Mountain, that maybe Israel wants to have a bigger portion and a more, I would say, take more responsibility on what happens up on the Temple Mountain. And that triggered many of those Israeli Arabs to start and attack their fellow Jewish neighbors in those cities. Right. People died because of this. Shuls were burned because of this. You can see, I brought a picture. You can take a look in Lod. There was a synagogue that was burnt. You can see one of the Gabbaim here. He's carrying the Sefer Torah, the Torah book that he could save from this synagogue. We've never thought to see something like that in Israel. For 100 years, we didn't see something like that. Right. And that happened in May 2021. And that led to people to start and understand that their homeland security is fragile. That the idea that they can live peacefully in Israel, not I'm talking about the West Bank, not living in Gush Etzion, not living in Ariel like this one, living in cities that are 15 minutes from Tel Aviv, like Lod, means that you are not safe. And that changed something in Israeli politic kind of ideas. And people started to say, wait, when I'm going to vote, I want to vote to someone who will make sure that I will feel safe where I live. And this is the first and foremost reason that the religious Zionist bloc has received so many votes, so many seats, because what they were, I would say, protesting for, what they were advocating is the idea of having this governance in Israeli cities and and feeling more confident and safer in Israeli cities. That is the first reason.
Yes. I could push you there and say, but don't they want to go further than, I mean, you're saying that people wanted security, but Bibi is Mr. Security. Ben Gvir and Smotrich want more than security. They want, a quote unquote permanent solution to these sorts of Arab uprisings, involving more drastic measures than just enforcing security. And maybe we'll get there a bit later.
It's just important to say.
People, I think, maybe underappreciate the way those events in May 2021 impacted voter consciousness.
If it wasn't so confusing so far, sorry, Rabbi, that interrupted. Just to say, the prime minister back then was none other than Bibi. Right. All right, Benjamin Netanyahu was the prime minister, not Lapid, not Bennett.
Right.
But still, now we can see the consequences.
The consciousness of people, the memory of what happened in those weeks is still very much alive. Israelis are, as much as their Sabra, very sensitive about security concerns.
Of course. How can we not be?
Right.
That's the first answer. Second answer, which is shorter, has to do with the past coalition. As many of you probably know, you followed Israeli news. You saw that among other new stuff that happened in the last Israeli coalition, for the first time in history, the Israeli coalition was also assembled by a Muslim Arab party. That's something that maybe you thought have ever happened before, but actually never. That was the first time. Usually, years after years, elections after elections, the Muslim Arab parties don't want to participate in any thing regarding a coalition. Forever, throughout, from the first time they were voted to the Knesset, they sat in the opposition.
Right.
They never wanted to participate or to partake any role in Israeli coalition. And here, Yair Lapid, who is now the current prime coalition, they had to rely on this person called
But
Mansour Abbas.
It's not that they didn't want to sit in the coalition. That wasn't what led to the change of voter preference this
No. I'm just
it's
saying
that it's that Bennett invited Mansour Abbas to sit in the coalition, and that angered a lot of religious Zionists. So can I ask you why?
Why? That's a great question.
From the perspective in North America, I thought that was a beautiful thing. Wonderful. We have an Arab party sitting in the Knesset and forming part of the government. What a wonderful advancement on the road to mutual understanding. Why do Israelis see that as treason?
Two reasons.
Okay.
First of all, Israelis, if there is something we don't like, is politicians that lie to us. If there's something really, we will punish politicians, and we see it time after time. We will punish politicians.
Bibi Netanyahu.
I thought you told me not to speak politics,
all right?
Fine. If we do something if there's something we don't like,
on a case-by-case basis.
On a case-by-case basis.
So you're saying at one point there was a promise made not to invite an Arab party.
Naftali Bennett, that was I think a week before the election.
Promised that he wouldn't.
Not only promised, he signed an agreement, a document saying two things. First, I will not let Yair Lapid be the prime minister.
Okay.
Lied, he did. We all know who's the prime minister today. Two, I will not relay, if I'm going to be the prime minister, my coalition will not include any Arab party whatsoever. No Arab party will be included, and he signed it. A week later, he formed this coalition with the Arab parties, with Yair Lapid. You can see the picture. This is a picture that drove people crazy in Israel, seeing Naftali Bennett with those two gentlemen here signing it. Now,
but I still don't think you're answering my question.
I'm not answering your question yet.
What is the issue with having Mansour Abbas, who I believe has a party with 3 people in it?
A little bit more, 4. He was 4, and now he's 5.
In the last election. Yeah. What is the problem with having a party representing the Arab population join with the government to make sure that the voices of the Arabs are heard in Knesset? That is, why did Bennett even have to sign an agreement like that? Why can't Israelis tolerate the presence of an Arab government in the coalition?
Mansour Abbas,
of an Arab party in the coalition.
Mansour Abbas, you can see him again in the picture here on the right. Mansour Abbas is the head of a Muslim Arab party called Ra'am.
Yes.
That's the name of it. It's mostly the dominant Arab party of what we call the Arabs of southern Israel, of the Negev, of the Bedouites, and so on.
Okay.
It's also a very interesting idea, like how exactly are the Arabs voting, but we don't have time for that. Mansour Abbas, for himself, he's a very nice person, I have to tell you. You can hear him in interviews, but his party is very religious Muslim party. In other words, that means that everything he's doing, he needs to get the acceptance, the agreement of his, what we call his sheikhs, his religious leaders, spiritual leaders. And what happened was that Israeli public saw for the first time how a government that needs to declare war, for example, or needs to register a law in the Israeli Knesset, is waiting to hear from this Muslim spiritual leader what he thinks. Should we do that? Maybe we shouldn't. The first time in history, the entire Israeli public had to rely on this Muslim spiritual leader, religious leader, who we all know is not a Zionist, who we all know he's also supporting terrorism. It's important to say, Mansour Abbas himself is not supporting terrorism, but he had people in his party and his leaders, his spiritual leaders, who supported terrorism, who supported terrorists from May 2021. He himself did not. He visited this shul that got burnt in May 2021. He himself did not. We need to say that. But Israeli public saw for the first time what it means that this is a Jewish democratic state. and we wait to hear what will the sheikh say about Israel.
So this isn't, in your opinion, it's not a racism thing. It's not we don't want Arabs in the government because they're Arabs. It's we don't want any decisions being made by the government to be subject to some sheikh that oversees the Ra'am party.
Israelis, and I allow myself to speak as an Israeli representative.
Yes.
Israelis have no problem with Arabs. Israelis have problems with terrorists and with terrorist supporters. And if there is a party, it can be Arab, there's no problem. There's Arabs in other parties as well, not only in Arab parties. But if there is a party, an Arab party that runs to Israeli parliament and doesn't condemn terrorism, Israeli think they have no role and they should never take any part in Israeli coalition. But here that happened, and many people said, we don't want that to happen again. We're going to vote to the far right that said, they declared and promised, we will never do that.
So moving on, there's a third reason.
The third reason, which is very interesting, the changes in the attitude towards the ultra-Orthodox. That's a huge discussion, a huge topic. What exactly are the relations between the ultra-Orthodox, as we say, Haredi community in Israel, to the country, to the government, and so on? But that was for the first time after many years that there was no Haredi party in the coalition. Usually they go along with Bibi every time he's the prime minister, but now Bibi was not the prime minister, so the Haredi parties were not part of this coalition. And what happened because of that is dramatic changes in the attitude towards this towards this group, this society, in terms of who rules the chief rabbinate, for example. The chief rabbinate in Israel, we know that there's no separation between church and state in Israel, and the chief rabbinate is the one that is responsible for every religious ritual, service, from weddings to divorce to Shabbat to everything, to kashrut to everything. And for the first time, we had a minister of religion who was not Haredi. He was Kippah Sruga, as we say.
But help me understand why. I understand the first two reasons, right? You said it's because of the Guardian of the Walls operation, the uprising in Lod, that motivated people to vote religious Zionist. The dissatisfaction with the previous government, and so we're punishing them, the left, for getting involved with a party that you say had terrorist connections. But this one I don't understand. So why am I voting for religious Zionists? Because of changing attitudes about the ultra-Orthodox.
So not only to religious Zionists, also to religious Zionists, but also to the Haredi parties. It's important to say, Shas is the Sephardic Haredi party in Israel. They received in the past elections 2 weeks ago, they received 11 seats. That didn't happen like 12 years, something like that. They moved from 8 to 11.
Non-Shas people are voting for Shas. They're expanding their base because the ultra-Orthodox are softening, moderating their views.
Not that they're moderating their views, but more people went out to vote to them, people that support them, and maybe they didn't go out voting before, because they saw what happens when they're not in the government. They saw that the religious Zionism or the religious status of the country is being changed. The status quo is changed. Now, Matan Kahana, this fellow here on the left, who was the minister of religion, he tried to have some reformation, some changes in the chief rabbinate. For example, who will give kashrut, who is able to supervise and to give certificate of kashrut to restaurants in general.
You're saying there were
conversions
in the previous government issues of sensitivity in the religious domain that Bennett revived, and I'm assuming the Kotel and the whole compromise with the Kotel is part of that.
Definitely.
And this fires up the base.
It fires up the base, and this gentleman on the right, Avigdor Lieberman, who's the head of the Israel Beitenu, he is the number one enemy of the Haredi parties in Israel.
How did he do in this election?
He has 6 seats. He will
not be sitting in the government.
He will not be sitting in the government. He used to go with Netanyahu all the time. but
Right.
now he doesn't want to go with the Haredim. And he said he was the Minister of Finance in Israel, and he had some rules, some new instructions, some new legislation, some new things that the Haredi thought are offensive towards them. For example, one of the things that he did is raising tax on soft drinks.
Yes.
One thing that happened in Israel now, soft drinks in Israel, you want to buy a Coke
Right. And I read
or a
that.
Fanta or something that costs you more than it costed 2 years ago. Why?
Right.
What's the reason? Lieberman, who decided on that, he was the Minister of Finance. He said, we want to educate the people in a way that they will drink like less soft drinks because it's not so healthy. And we want to advocate to encourage them to drink more water. All right, for example, that to put aside the question, is that even his role and so on, he said it's very good because the country will receive a lot of money from the taxes.
Right.
The Haredi people
Didn't like it.
didn't like it at all. Now
They
you'll
don't
say
like
why?
government interference in their affairs, and even soft drinks are their affairs.
They said, who is the number one group to get offended
Right.
by this?
Targeting us.
Yeah,
We
because
drink
they are the
soft
one that drink soft drinks.
One of the things that you didn't mention here that I'm hearing people talk about is that there was a large number of Israelis who felt that the Israeli media was targeting the right unfairly in their criticism, almost more than they would target terrorists, right? That they became the enemy in more liberal media circles, and that the support that Netanyahu and Tzionut Hadatit received, some of that was a finger to the media that tends to be more liberal.
It's right that the media in Israel used to be very left. It's not, people know that. People know that, and they also say that about themselves. But for the past 5 years, even more, it really changed. There's so many channels now. There's so many newspapers. There's so many radio
You
stations.
don't agree with that
No,
assessment?
definitely no.
Your
If
friends
you're right wing,
who changed to religious Zionists, it wasn't a reaction against biased media coverage.
not as
They were
they
voting on
represent.
these issues.
Not as they present. It was very it was a very ideological kind of vote. This time.
Right, ideological, and it would seem by what you're saying, very tribal in that sense, which is a manifestation of politics that's happening in
Israel
many,
is
many
more
different
split today than it
countries.
was 2 weeks ago. Definitely.
I am this, and so I need a party that's going to support me and my interests, and that has my back, and I'm not really interested in what anybody else has to say.
Definitely.
So that was one of the interesting questions that I wanted to explore with Rabbi Rakovsky, why people voted for this religious Zionist bloc. And I want to push you further now. So you said why they voted for the bloc, but why excuse the rhetoric that Ben Gvir uses? That is, voting for these things, we understand. You're expressing your dissatisfaction. But for a man who believes in annexation, am I correct that Ben Gvir and Smotrich?
So you talk about myself.
No. Ben Gvir and Smotrich believe in annexation, and that seem to want to define religious Zionism as a movement that will now wave that flag, that is the road ahead. It's annexation. Why excuse that? And some of his other rhetoric that seems to be quite controversial.
I would just say, first of all, because I don't think I said it, and it's very important, because I think you mentioned it, Rabbi, when you're opening thing. I affiliate myself with religious Zionism.
Yes.
But I personally don't find the religious Zionism party representative of myself by any means.
Okay.
And I'm not the only one.
So you're interesting to talk to. Why not?
Why not? Religious Zionism is very wide. Think about, for example, having a party called the Modern Orthodox. It's a big tent. Who is Bezalel Smotrich?
Yes.
To decide that he is a representative of the Tzionut Hadatit. that he is the number one
But
representative
what
of
is the
Zionism.
issue that bothers you? Is it his claiming authority over religious Zionism, or are there deeper issues, that is policy issues, in which you feel some sort of moral conflict in supporting him?
The basic thing is that what he says and claims, and I very respect him as a politician, he's a very smart, clever politician,
Yeah.
and he should be in the Israeli parliament. But what I personally, and now I'm talking to myself, but I know there's some
Yes.
voices like that in Israel as well. What I personally have problem with is the idea that what he says, he has his ideas, which some of them are extreme. Some of them are extreme in terms of church
help
and
us
state. So let's,
understand, what are we talking about when we say extreme? Annexation?
annexation in Israel is not so extreme.
Annexation is not extreme.
Not
So you're
extreme.
saying, no, but it's helpful to understand.
Naftali Bennett
So
wants
an
annexation.
increasingly large number of Israelis believe that the West Bank
Should be annexed
should
to
be
Israel.
annexed by Israel.
Exactly.
It's not an
We had a
extreme.
prime minister that thought that.
So the accusations against Ben-Gvir of being racist, where does that come from?
That comes from the idea that he follows the Kahana way, ideas, even though he himself says he's not a supporter of Kahana anymore.
Right.
But just like 1 week ago, he went and he spoke there was a yard site
Right,
event
he
in
spoke-
Yerushalayim, and he spoke about him and so on and on. But we know that he also had a picture in his own house from a picture of Baruch Goldstein.
Right.
The Baruch Goldstein, just in one word, he was an Israeli terrorist that shot, he went into that was in 92, I think.
Yes.
Right? And he went into the Ma'arat HaMachpelah, into the, here in Hebron, and he shot Muslim people that
But in
prayed
your view,
in the cave.
annexation is not as
No,
controversial
no.
as we might think it is. Is supporting someone like Baruch Goldstein, is supporting Jewish
Extreme,
terrorism,
extreme.
extremism?
Very, very extreme.
Does the religious Zionist party believe in Jewish terrorism?
No, no, and no. But when Bezalel Smotrich, who's the leader, and Ben-Gvir, number two, when they were asked by Israeli reporters, do you define Baruch Goldstein as a terrorist?
Yes.
They said no. He's not a terrorist. He said only Arabs are terrorists. Only those who try to fight Israel's existence are terrorists. He's a criminal. They're not supporting and they're not advocating to what he did at all. But they refuse to define Jewish terrorism as terrorism.
So that's not enough that wasn't enough to scare away people from voting for them.
No.
What about everything we're hearing about the undemocratic changes that their party supports in the Israeli government? I've heard from people that they support getting rid of judges and the power of the courts.
That's a good question.
That
That's
they
a very
want to permit politicians or grant them exemptions from being tried on anything while they're sitting in office. So that also gets excused by their supporters?
So the jurisdiction system, sorry for the English.
Judicial.
Okay, here we go. You said the word.
Yes.
In Israel, it's a big issue now because we have the future Prime Minister Benyamin Netanyahu, who is facing a trial, and he is right now accused for bribery, and he's accused for many other stuff that are very, very bad. But the right wing in Israel politics, and this is very, very wide. It goes from Naftali Bennett to Gideon Sa'ar, who's not going to be part of this coalition, who is in Gantz's party, where it's more like right center, all the way to Ben-Gvir. They all agree that some changes needs to be made and done regarding Israeli Supreme Court. In terms of, I would say two things that the most important stuff. First of all, they want that politicians will appoint the judges. First thing that they want, like in any other place, like in America.
Right now, who appoints judges in
Israel?
Israel?
There is a committee that does it, and they're not all of them are politicians, and it's very complicated.
Right.
Very complicated, and they feel like the government should appoint more.
Okay.
All right. They want the the politicians want more power in controlling the Supreme Court. Again, we can affiliate with what happened in the US, right? It's very similar to that, very similar to that. The second thing, which is in a huge controversy in Israel, is what is called in Hebrew Piskat Hidgabrut. Piskat Hidgabrut means, in free translation, means the overcoming law. Okay, they want all those in this new coalition, they will do it next week. They want to legislate a new law that will say that the Supreme Court will not be able to cancel laws legislated by the Knesset if it was being legislated more than by 61 people, 61 members.
Right.
For now how it works.
This,
the
in
activism,
English, we call parliamentary supremacy.
Here you go.
In Israel, right now, you're saying
the
Supreme Court is permitted to overturn a law that they deem to be,
if they think it's unjust, if they think it violates human rights,
and
if they think so on and on. It didn't happen a lot of times. It happened like 12 or 15 times in Israeli history. But this activism, the idea that the judge can be activated and can actually no one chose him. That's what you're saying is, it makes sense. I'll be honest with you. What you're saying is no one from the Israeli public chose their judges, and they chose us as their representative. And we want to execute what they sent us to do, and we're doing something. We want to pass this new law, but then comes the Supreme Court with whoever judges are there. No one chose them. The public did not vote for them, and they're canceling and overturning our decision as parliament. But who voted for them? Who said that they can do that? So what they want to do is pass this law that will overcome the Supreme Court. And if the Supreme Court cancels the law, they will be able to again pass the law in the Knesset in a majority of 61, which means just like the smallest majority possible.
So let's turn now to the future and what we're likely to see from this new government in the coming years. First of all, I think what's important, I'll say it again, is in your opinion, this is a stable government. So if you don't like it, we're in for a long ride. We're likely to see, without a doubt, because of the presence of religious parties in the coalition, funding for yeshivas, an increased role of religion in the state, probably soda tax removed, interests of those demographic groups being accommodated by the government. The question I have is the other stuff that we just mentioned, the issues of concern that you think motivated such a large part of Israeli society to go right, to Tzionut Datit. How do you see Bibi and Smotrich and Ben Gvir responding, for instance, to a terrorist attack like the one that happened today? Do you think it will be different than in the last government or in a previous Bibi government?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because many people are concerned about. I'll be honest. My personal opinion here.
I invited you here for honesty.
For honesty, only honesty,
right?
Only honesty. I think that even the most extreme politician like Ben Gvir, for example, or Smotrich, what they say during a campaign and what they will say when they are getting in office is two different stuff.
So this is the hope of many people that I've spoken to also in Israel, who are nervous about some of the things that Ben Gvir has said, mostly in the past, but even during the campaign. They say that being in government will moderate you. You have to listen to other people, and you need to compromise.
Ariel Sharon, when he was a prime minister,
like Sharon is a great example.
Right, he said in Hebrew, "Ma shero'im mikan, lo ro'im misham." What you see from here is not what you see from there. When you're in campaign, you see this and you say that, but when you're actually sitting in office and you see how complicated it is, then you start to understand that it's not as simple as you thought it was.
So your view then is we're not likely going to see any radical or extreme changes in Israeli policy towards the Palestinians, changes that we would not already be familiar with from
Benjamin Netanyahu had the perfect opportunity to annex the West Bank, the sea
Yes.
area, when President Trump was in office, and President Trump said, I have no problem. You want to do it? Do it. We know he went to Washington and they were
Right.
talking about it. But then at the last minute, the last moment before he thought of doing it, Benjamin Netanyahu decided that he wants to put that aside. And instead he wants to go to have deal, we call it the Abraham Courts, have it with the UAE
Right.
and with Bahrain and all those kind of
Those are
countries.
done now.
Those are done now. And they were done on
And Bibi probably doesn't want to disturb the status
it
quo.
will not, no one will annex anyone in Israel. Probably that's what I think. I don't think this government will annex any of the Palestinians of the West Bank. Just because Netanyahu, who apparently is the most left in this government now,
Yeah.
he will not let it. He doesn't want it.
So-
He doesn't believe in that.
So I'm assuming then that the editorials that are being written, some of which suggest that we've lost the Israel that we've known for all these decades. This is a new Israel, one that is less democratic now, one that has given in to tribalism. You don't see that on the horizon. You don't see a different Israel than the one we're used to. I mean, I know you're saying you don't see annexation or extreme measures, but what about collective punishment, right? Is that something that we might see more of from this government?
I think what we will see for the most, I would say the biggest changes
Yeah,
that they will do is in terms of the Supreme Court. For sure, the Supreme Court would not look the same as it looks now.
right.
The entire way that Israel is dealing with justice will be totally different after this government.
Okay.
That's for sure. I can tell you that. I don't think there will be any changes for the Temple Mount. Many people were very concerned about that Ben Gvir and Smotrich not, but Ben Gvir goes up to the Temple Mount and he advocates for Aliyah to Har HaBayit, to go up to the Temple Mount, which we know today is the only place on earth where Jews are not allowed to pray.
And you don't believe that
He said he
status
he
quo
would
not
not change the status quo
Okay,
because we know that the moment he does it,
start a war,
it's a World War III.
right?
We know that will happen, and for now he said, and if Ben Gvir will not do that, no one will do that.
Right.
So he said already he will not do that. What he says he said he will do, and I hope not as a supporter of Ben Gvir, as someone who did not vote to Ben Gvir, but I would say I still hope he will do, is try and bring back the security to the people. Try to bring back the feeling that you are safe in your homes, you are safe in your cities, by what he wants, to bring more cops, to pay the cops more, to open more police stations in Israel, to have the soldiers and the cops be more, have more, I would say, they can take larger steps when they want to fight
Right.
terrorism.
So these are incremental liberalizing changes designed to give a bit more strength to security forces to deal with problems on the ground. In your mind, they're not revolutionary changes that you see on the horizon that would lead to, for instance, group punishment for...
No, I don't see
terrorist
any
attacks.
revolutionary changes. I would say that I do see that big problems that should be taken care of will not be taken care of. For example, there's a huge problem with the Israel in the future. Let's talk about Israel in 2024.
So this is an
We
old
believe-
issue
yeah.
that Israelis are always saying, because our security concerns are always front and center, it's all we have time to focus on, and you can only handle so much at the same time. So a lot of the underlying problems don't get dealt with because right now it's just security, security, security. And you see that being a feature of this government because there's so many special interests there already that don't care about necessarily the national interest as much as they care about their own
Not
particular
first of all,
interests.
definitely, but
Yes.
even if you want to say also that, for example, today the ultra-Orthodox community in Israel, the ultra-Orthodox group in Israel, they're only employed by 51%. Only 51% of the ultra-Orthodox men in Israel are employed. And in 30 years, they will become the third largest group in Israel in terms of, Now think what will happen in the future. If you have 3 million 4 million.
Right, you're saying there's an
people.
issue that we have to deal with.
And not only that it's not going to be dealt with, it will even going to be turned to be more severe.
More severe because the
Yeah.
yeshivas are just getting more money.
For example,
I want to get to questions. So let me just ask, first, speak to this congregation, and then I want to ask you personally. I know that some people you're speaking in a conservative synagogue. Our idea of religious Zionism, I don't think is that much different than anyone else's. That is, we recognize not just the historical importance of the creation of the state, but also the religious importance of the creation of the state of Israel. But we see that one of the platforms of religious Zionists in Israel is delegitimizing pluralistic Judaism, denigrating the reform and conservative. I mean, apparently right away after the election, Ben-Gvir was already talking about why is it that reform conversions are accepted in Israel? That's on my list of things I want to change. So do you think reform and conservative Jews have reason to worry? Do you see the connection between reform and conservative Jews with Israel weakening? Is that now under threat?
wow. I will say that. I think that Israel as a country, as a land, is bigger than its politicians. I think that doesn't matter what is the elections results, doesn't matter who's in office, doesn't matter who's in coalition. Israel, Eretz Israel, the land of Israel, Israel the country, the modern state, is bigger than its politicians. And for the Jewish diaspora, not only the Orthodox, I would say, right, I think that even if we don't like, and I assume most of those don't like the Israeli results of these elections, we should still understand that the land and Israel is bigger than its politicians. And we should also have this sense of hakarat tov, of gratitude, that Israel—
But the work is going to be harder. In the next few years, the work is going to be a lot harder for rabbis like me to push people to connect to Israel, given some of the rhetoric already from members of the coalition. And it was tough under Bibi last time. It's going to be even harder now.
So that's exactly what I'm saying.
On issues that people care about here, like religious pluralism, for instance.
So I'll tell you that again. You have way more experience with community, was working with Jewish communities than I do, Rabbi. And I'll be honest, I will say, I don't think that our affiliation and our support to the state of Israel and our connection to the state of Israel should be impacted by which government is now operating in Israel. I think that our support to Israel should be something that is bigger than that. And it doesn't matter who's the prime minister, and it doesn't matter what you're doing. We love the state of Israel. We love Israel, the land of Israel, because this is our only homeland. Only. So yes, there are some things maybe regarding conversions and weddings. And I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying it should not be changed, and I'm not saying it should not be easier. But the connection has to be deeper than headlines and then the politics, for sure. And we should have a hakarat tov and gratitude that Israel, after all this, is still the only fully democratic country in the Middle East. Sometimes we don't really appreciate, but also this is also this government was chosen in a democratic way, in a total democratic way, and no one in Israeli government, no one in Israeli politics from right to left tried to say maybe those elections were stolen. We respect the results because Israel is and will be forever a democratic country. And we should also have gratitude that, okay, maybe we don't like the results as Jewish in the diaspora, but this is what the Israeli public voted. And we love the country, we love the land more than the politics.
So I was going to ask you about your personal feelings, but I think you just articulated them, right? Your optimism and your sense of connection and religious importance of the land goes beyond the results of this last election. But so I'll rephrase my question. Instead of asking you about your thoughts about what will portend from this government, you're someone who identifies themselves as a religious Zionist. You work for a religious Zionist institution. And you've seen what has happened to the religious Zionist bloc, right? The people they've elected, the rhetoric. What are your thoughts about what has happened to the religious Zionist camp in Israel? Is it heading in a direction that's making it more difficult for you to be associated with those words?
Yes.
Like, is it?
Yes.
It's getting away from you, the party.
One of the leading Rabbaniyot, as we say, she's a woman spiritual leader.
Yes.
In under the religious Zionist movement, not the party movement in Israel. Her name is Rabbanit Malka Rakovsky. And Rabbanit Rakovsky said I think that was 2 years ago, even before those elections, way before those elections, she asked a simple question, which I think is right. Like, and maybe me and her and other like us, which we don't affiliate with the religious Zionism that is demonstrated and led by Ben Gvir and Smotrich, maybe we should not call ourselves religious Zionists anymore.
And maybe
I don't really have a problem with that. Yeah.
Okay. I want to end there because I think that's fascinating. What is happening to religious Zionism, and perhaps the need to form an alternative political movement. If this is where things are headed, with the political representation from that camp, maybe there should be an alternative for those who want a more moderate religious Zionism that doesn't rely on hatred for Arabs or extremist approaches towards solving the Arab-Israeli conflict that just don't get articulated by the religious Zionist camp, because the more moderate wing hasn't done a good enough job at organizing. And just the right wingers know how to play the system. They know how to get organized. They know how to stir people up, get them to vote, make issues bigger than they are, and bring people out. So we'll worry about that in a few years when there's another chance at this. I want to know if anyone first in the room has questions, and then we'll take some questions from those on Zoom. If you're joining us on Zoom and have a question, I'll ask you to type it, please, in the chat box. And Daniel, who's here, will read out, let's say, a question that he likes the most, all right? Or one or two questions that he likes the most. I put it in your hands, Daniel. Howard.
Okay, so,
and I'll repeat Howard's question so everyone on Zoom can hear. Yeah.
You say you have a stable government. Does that mean Netanyahu's free of the corruption charges now?
So the question that Howard's asking is Netanyahu part of this stable government that we're not going to hear about corruption charges anymore against Bibi Netanyahu?
That's a great question. The simple answer is no. We will continue hearing about it, simply because he said so. Benyamin Netanyahu, and again, you say his liability is questioned.
Yes.
Questioned. Okay. But he said so, and he continues saying so.
He said what?
He said that the idea that he will be a prime minister, he will not do anything that will affect his trial. Nothing.
Okay, so Bibi
he said that. That's why I say it's a simple. He said that. He said that nothing. He himself, as the prime minister,
he will not take any
action that will affect his trial. However, that's the second part of it. His fellow parties in his coalition said different things, and they said that they will take action and they will change some stuff that will help Netanyahu in his trial. So we'll have to see who's gonna say
right. This is something else that I think we don't understand necessarily in North America. That the religious Zionist party crafted their message, it seems, not only to garner support for themselves, but to advocate for a stable government with Bibi at the head. That is, they said, vote for us, not so that we can be prime minister. We have no interest in leading the country. What we want is Bibi to be our prime minister. His ticket to a stable government, becoming prime minister, is all of you voting for the religious Zionist bloc. That will make sure that he remains prime minister. So that when we're hearing that the other parties want to get him out of these corruption charges or make sure that he's not held accountable, it's because they want him to be prime minister, and will do what it takes, even even to be more protective of Bibi than Bibi is of himself.
Can I ask you a question, Rabbi?
Yes,
Short question,
yeah,
very short.
We're here for you. But
Very
yes,
short
yeah.
question. I think and you don't have to answer. I will.
Yeah.
I will just say it out loud. I'll just ask everyone. I think a very interesting question should be asked: why, despite those corruption case and despite the trial, Bibi Netanyahu received 31 seats in parliament? Why didn't it impact
Right.
anyone?
So it's a rhetorical question. So why?
Think about that.
Yes.
Maybe many of the people in Israel don't really believe that he will be guilty. They will be found guilty on what he's doing. And many people
Right.
think that
Was not
it's not just. Yeah.
right. And maybe it goes back to what we were saying earlier. The overwhelming interest of the Israeli electorate today is security, even though there's no active war going on now. Israelis have a long memory, and it's hard to get over the events even of a few years ago when they saw their neighbors rising up against them. And often I think in Israeli politics, you can disagree with me if you'd like, but I think you'd agree with me that it's about what am I most afraid of? And that's what you're thinking of in the voting booth. What's my biggest fear? Am I most worried about terrorists or the left or extremist rhetoric that might provoke more terrorism? And I think in this election, people were not most afraid of losing democracy or Bibi not being held accountable for his charges. It just didn't seem to be in anyone's calculus. It's kitchen table issues. What's good for me and my family? And Bibi going to jail would not be good for me and my family, because he's the only guy who can give us a stable government that is secure and strong against the Arabs.
Couldn't phrase it better.
Sometimes getting in the head of the Israeli voter, I think, helps us tone down some of the very extreme reactions to this election, like those I mentioned earlier, like Israel is lost. This is a game changer election, a totally new country. It's interesting to hear from Rabbi Rakovsky that in his mind, it's not the case. This will be largely more of the same. So I'm not sure.
We'll see.
Coming months. We'll see. Anything on the chat, Daniel?
Yeah, we have a comment from Barry who says,
Okay.
I'm worried that as a non-observant Jew, I will be made to feel unwelcome and unworthy in Israel. It is hard to be supportive of Israel when the country is not supportive of my sense of Judaism.
So I'm not sure everyone heard that on Zoom, but Barry's question relates to a question I asked earlier, right? How can I support a country that doesn't support me as a non-Orthodox Jew, that doesn't recognize me? And I'm worried that the new government will stir up these issues that will increasingly alienate me from Israel. What advice do you have for someone like Barry?
My advice.
I know you said it earlier, but maybe say it again.
Make Aliyah?
No.
Let me explain. No, really, let me explain.
The answer to all questions. Make Aliyah.
Because if we were worried about the way that the government is treating non-Orthodox groups, then non-Orthodox groups should be stronger in Israel, vote for the Knesset, send representative, and fight for that.
But be more practical.
Unfortunately, I'm very practical. I'm telling you. No, Rabbi, I'm not kidding. I am not kidding. If this is what's important for us, it's very easy. I'm saying, and I'm sitting here in Canada right now, folks, but it's very easy to sit in Canada, snowing outside, it's warm indoors, and to complain that Israel doesn't represent me. But in order for Israel to represent you, if this is your country, if you care about this land, go and live there and vote and represent yourself and advocate for what's important for you.
But okay, so I don't like that answer.
I know you
But
don't
it's
like
okay.
it, but
I
this is my
invited you here
answer.
so I can disagree with you.
That's
You
my
know
answer.
that it's the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel
I
proclaims
knew
that
you'll
it's
say
the
that.
land for the Jewish people.
Of course it is.
So what do you say to Barry, who is a member of the Jewish people, who reads that constitution and says, this country is for me, isn't it? Don't you, the voter in Israel, have an obligation to make sure that it remains a country for non-Orthodox Jews too?
Hang on. That's
You want to help me?
Wait, let's get an answer from Rabbi Rakovsky and
the mix.
okay.
What percentage of the population of Jewish people in Israel are Orthodox, and how many are non-observant completely? Like, isn't there a very large non-observant population?
That's a
there
great
already?
question. I'll say that even what we call non-observant Jews in Israel, the
Yes.
Chilonim, the seculars, they're also Orthodox
Right.
seculars. They're Orthodox, not non-observant, which is something that we don't really find here. Also, the non-observant Orthodox in Israel, those who don't keep Shabbat, some of them keep a certain amount of kashrut and so on. Also, they in polls, you can see, will not want to have, and they say, unfortunately, an egalitarian piece of the
But you
kotel.
know that even though they may not want an egalitarian kotel, they hate kefiyah datit. They don't like being forced into religious observance that they don't believe in. They don't like the exemption from army service that goes to the
That's a
yeshivas.
different case.
No, but it's all related to the religion and state. I still am waiting for a good answer to Barry's question, which I think you offered already, right? When you talked about where your connection to Israel comes from. But I don't mind if you say it again.
Yeah, I'm saying it again. I will say it again, but I think Barry's question was for the government and not for the land. Our connection to the land of Israel, again, supposed to be bigger than any politicians whatsoever, than any government and than any coalition. This coalition, the maximum it will be in office is for 4 years, and then we'll go again to elections,
Yes,
and then we'll be able to change it. The land of Israel is bigger than that.
So on that, I agree with you.
Okay.
I think
And
that
I'm not
advice-
removing
that
my first
instinct
answer,
is
Rabbi.
correct.
I still stick with my first answer as well.
What we're learning, I hope, in this conversation with you that I've really enjoyed, Rabbi, is the complexity with which a voter walks into that booth and checks that box. This is the outcome of many different factors that went into people's minds, probably having nothing to do with the status of Reform and conservative Judaism or Jews in the diaspora or in Israel. This was about riots, it was about security, and these trump other issues. And it's true that voting in this way comes along with challenges for issues that we may care about. But we shouldn't take that as a signal that something fundamental has changed about the nature of the country or something should change about our connection.
Israel
to the
welcomes any Jew
It remains
whatsoever.
and this is just
they will
what's
come-
happened this election, and next time we may have a different outcome.
And to remember, yeah.
And hopefully in a time when there are other issues that can dominate the agenda, like the issues you mentioned really need attention, but are getting swept under the rug so that people can feel safe.
And I want to say again, because
Yeah.
it's important that at the end of the day, I am happy, not because of the government, but because Israel is a democratic country. And look what happens now in the Middle East. And the idea that after 75 years, we'll celebrate 75 years this year for Israel, that after 75 years, we manage to have this beautiful, wonderful country, an open democratic country, is something that should never, ever, ever be taken for granted.
Daniel, is there another question from the chat?
I think that's pretty good. There's some other comments, but
Let me
We'll
see
share
them
them-
afterwards.
We'll share them after.
Let me see them out.
So are we at time now? I think we are.
yes.
I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that, like me, you feel more enlightened about the results, more knowledgeable about what's at stake and what's not at stake, and about what happened a couple of weeks ago and how Israel is likely to change and not change as a result of this election. What I think is also really important that came out of this conversation, and I want to stress this to you, I am hearing more and more from people like yourself, the need for a different kind of religious Zionism that can speak against the racialized religious Zionism, the hateful rhetoric against Arabs, and define a religious Zionism that speaks the language of coexistence, but is still rooted in the faith, in the ideas of Rav Kook that are at the root of religious Zionism, right? In the theology of the great teachers of religious Zionism. I'm hearing from more and more people that they feel like the movement is getting away from them and is going in places that are increasingly frightening for more mainstream-minded religious Zionists. So I hope people like you and the people you're with can find some expression to moderate the religious Zionist movement, because we benefit from it tremendously. We don't realize it in Toronto, but we really do benefit from the energy and vitality of a strong religious Zionist movement. And I personally would hate to see it become Ben Gvir's religious Zionism, which I think would be very alienating to many people who want coexistence and not domination. So thank you very much for your time and your wisdom, and
thank you very much.
You're
It's always a
of
pleasure
our
to be here.
synagogue, and I hope
Thank
we'll
you
have
very
you back
much.
other times.
It's always a pleasure.
Thank you for everyone on Zoom, and to Daniel for moderating the conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming here in person tonight, and to those on Zoom. Thank you all.